In this episode, I'm going to be making a router clamp. So let's get started. So basically what this is a clamp that allows you to clamp the top of your router and make it work just like a little mini router table. So this little item is courtesy of some of the woodworkers from the Sunflower Woodworkers Guild in Wichita, Kansas, which I'm a member of. They graciously keep me on there. And this is actually a prototype. They sent me some plans on what this is, and I've had to modify this a little bit, but this kind of device will work on a variety of routers, and I'll show you what routers it will work on and probably what routers it won't work on. So let's have a quick look at that. So where this little clamping device would work is on mid-size routers. So something with probably a 1.5 horse, something like that, and it needs some sort of a round base up top to be able to clamp onto that. Where it won't work is on a bigger router, a heavier router, and you can see that this has got adjustments up here. If it didn't have these adjustments, you might be able to do it, but this simply won't work. The other one that I probably don't recommend, this is really not designed for palm routers. This one here, for example, is cordless. That's a battery on there, so you really don't want to be trying to attach a battery to make sure that your router is going to stay attached. You'd have to really clamp it here. So it's really the palm router is really too small for what we're about to do today. So I'll show you in the article on Woodwork Web exactly the dimensions and so on for this, but depending on what router you're installing it in, yours may be slightly different. Mine, this area here is 1.5 inches, or sorry, 1.25 inches, and the bottom is 1.25 inches. So that means when after you've glued the plywood together and done some fitting and so on, you'll have to cut that plywood down. The reason I'm using plywood is right there because of those sliders in there. You don't want to use natural wood because natural wood expands and contracts. Plywood does to a small degree as well, but not as much, and that's why I'm using plywood in there, and also because it's sort of stronger in all dimensions. The first thing we need to do is to find out exactly what the diameter of the sort of the head of your router is, and you might be surprised. I thought mine was round, but it's not. It's actually a little bit oval, so I have to find the widest part, which is right about there, and then I'll measure that. And in my case, that turns out to be just a little under 4 inches. So I'm going to make this part here at 4 inches. But this is a prototype, so the first thing we're going to do is put the plywood together. I have 2 pieces of plywood here, cabinet grade, so it's good quality. And when I flip them over like this, before I glue them, you'll see that the top one is slightly smaller than the bottom one, and that's done for a reason, and I'll show you that in a little bit here. So the next thing we need to do is just put some glue on there and put these two together. Now when you flip these two over and put them together, they're going to want to slide because the surface tension is wanting these two to sort of float. So here's what you do. Take on one side, just allow this to sit on top. And there's a little bit, you can see a little bit of a rim down here. And now the first thing you want to do is just put a C-clamp on there just to snug that down, and we'll do the same on the other side. And then after this will just prevent it from moving around. That's all this is going to do. And you can see even that wants it to move. Okay, I'm at the table saw, and remember I glued this wood a little bit proud on all sides, and the reason for that is I knew I couldn't align one side perfectly. So what I'm going to do right now, because I have a flat side here, I'm going to cut this side off, and I'm just going to trim the whole thing all the way along. This will give me a perfect edge on this side. Then I can flip it around and cut it to size. In this case, it's 5 inches. So the table saw is already set up. Okay, the next thing I need to do is to mark the holes. So the top hole, of course, is for the router to sit in, but the lower one is to vent the motor in there so that you get airflow going through there. Okay, now the next thing I need to do is to take these both back to the table saw, and I'm going to cut a straight line down each one of those, because these I'm going to cut out on my bandsaw. But the next thing I need to do now is I need to take these all over to the table saw, and I'm just going to do this offline. What I need to do is I need to trim them at 1 1/4 inches, because I've determined with my router and my setup 1 1/4 inches is sort of the ideal thickness of this. So I'm going to go and do that. The next thing we need to do is we need to drill these holes here, and these holes on the underside are for the bar, and that's a quarter. In this case, we're using a 1/4 inch bar. We're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole in there as well, and that will keep that bar nice and snug in there so that there isn't any play. You can see there's no play in this, so it's nice and tight. Okay, so I'm going to cut these 7/8 holes first of all, and I don't have to worry about the fence. It's already lined up on both sides. They'll be exactly the same. I only have to line up the bit on this side. So I'm just going to go ahead and drill those. I'm not going to show you everything, just the start of this first hole. Okay, now to drill these matching holes, because this is where the bars are going to go through, we need to get them to match. So the way we do that is we set up our fence and we make sure that both of these pieces of wood they're at the back. They're always going to be at the back, and that way, with that alignment, we always know that this plane is going to be exactly perfect. Now the other thing that I've done, you'll notice I have a clamp here, and you'll notice another one on this side. And the purpose of that, and they're also rounded as well. So when I touch up to that clamp, you'll notice that my 1/4 inch Forstner bit aligns with that side of the block, and over here it aligns with the other one. And because these were cut from the same piece of wood, I can do the same thing on this side and be sure that they're going to be virtually identical, if not identical. So I can do both of those. Let me show you, this is just, you can buy this steel bar, soft, mild steel bar at any hardware store. What I did to prepare these, I took a little file, and I just filed off a little bit of a flat spot on either side here, and then you need to put that in a place where you can use a punch, because you have to make a very small indentation before you drill a hole. Now you could use a nail or anything as a stopper in there. I have these little, I don't know if you can see them, these little keepers, I forget what they're called, that I use that I can take in and out. I just happen to, and I only have 3 of them, so I have to use a nail because I don't know where I picked these up from. But they're very handy. But now we get to see if this is actually going to line up. So I'm going to put that through. All right, let's put the other one in here. And it's a good tight fit. That's exactly what you want. There we have it. nice tight fit, goes all the way closed and opens up. Now let's put the router in there. There we go, and you can see the cut on that now, and that is actually, and I'm just holding that, and you can see that that's already much tighter. Now the other thing that I wanted to do with this that I didn't do with my prototype, I want to line this with some anti-skid material. So I'm just going to use my hot glue gun and just sort of tack it in there. Okay, and the hot melt glue, all that's to do is just sort of keep that from falling out, because it's not really holding anything. It's just keeping it from moving around. And now I can put my router in there, and that's just going to be super strong. Let's take that and put that in my vise. Oh, and by the way, while this was being glued up and sitting overnight, I made this little deck on here because this is really too small to do any work with, and also the hole is quite a bit bigger. You can see that I've got a much smaller hole now for bits in there. So okay, so there it is set up in my wood vise, and I know some of you are going to be skeptical on how strong or how stable this thing is, because I was as well, but look at this. You know, that is, and that isn't really cranked hard. That is not going anywhere. I'm moving my whole workbench with that. So it is actually very stable. Now, of course, this is not a substitute for a router table. This is a handy little thing if you're doing demos at a, you know, maybe a fall fair or something like that. You don't want to take out a great big router table. This is a quick way of doing, because you could mount something like this even in a sort of those little portable benches with clamps in them. There's a variety of those on the market. You could use this for a lot of places. Now, I'm going to do a couple of demonstrations here. The first one, I'm going to do a freehand, so I've got nothing, and you do the same thing with a router table. Usually you would start with a starting pin, but I don't even do that, and I'm just going to go around. I only have a round over bit in here right now, so nothing fancy. And you could do this by hand, but it's a lot easier to do things like this on a router table. And even this is going to be a suitable substitute. Now, the other thing I should tell you, if you're not familiar with routers, you would never ever use a bit that doesn't have a bearing. No matter what, with a router table or with this, you would never use a straight bit that doesn't have a bearing, because you need something for that bearing to ride against. So we're going to do that. But in a moment, I'm going to put a fence on this and use a fence with this, and that is awesome. So let's have a quick look here. So that wasn't scary. That wasn't scary at all. It works just like a router table. In fact, it's actually nice because you could actually do demonstrations like this at a club meeting, for example. I just think this is a handy little item. I'm going to put a fence on here now. So I've just clamped the fence on here, and you know, you don't have to be anything fancy with a fence. You know, the earliest forms of fences on routers were pieces of wood with a hole cut out in it, and the only thing you have to worry about is that the piece of wood is straight and flat all the way across. You don't have to worry about the height, because usually you don't really need the height. You're usually laying things flat, and the only thing you do with this is the same thing you do with a router table. I isolated the bearing, so that means that the bearing is flush all the way across here, and now I could use it even freehand, but now I could use longer wood if I want to do that as well. Well, I have to say, of all the jigs I've made, this is among the most impressive that I've seen. This actually works very well. It's strong, it's rigid, it's portable, it works well. It does everything that a router table would do on more of a miniature basis. I just think this is a great little setup. So thanks to the folks at Sunflower Woodworkers Guild. This was who sent me plans and things like that, and the idea and pictures. This was a great little build. I really enjoyed this. I think a lot of people are going to get some good value from this. Well, before I run away today, I want to remind you, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I invite you to do that so that you get updated on the latest videos that I put out. Next week, for example, is going to be a video I've been working on for a while on finishing. Even if you are an experienced woodworker, I'm pretty sure there's some things you're going to learn there that will be aha moments for you. I also want to give a shout out today to a couple of the woodworking clubs, guilds that keep me on their books and send me emails and newsletters. I appreciate them both. One is the Ames Woodworkers Guild in Ames, Iowa, near Des Moines. And the other one is the Sunflower Woodworkers Guild in Wichita, Kansas. Thanks both of you for all the things that you send me, newsletters and so on. I appreciate that. In this video, I talked about other jigs that I've used that I really liked. One of them was the L fence, or what we used to call a duplicating fence. I get a ton of use out of that. The video for that's going to show up there. If you haven't seen it, that's a video that you're probably going to want to have a look at. It's pretty easy to make, and it's a pretty useful, very, very useful for me anyway. That concludes my video for today. I'm Colin Cadet for Woodwork Web. Don't miss next week.